Government announced that it executed 23-year-old Mohsen Shakari on Thursday. He is one of 12 protesters who have been sentenced to death by the regime, according to the UN. On Friday, a top Iranian official suggested more executions were imminent. The protest was sparked by the death of Mahsa Amini. She died after she was arrested by Iran's morality police. I want to bring in the British-Iranian actress and activist Nazanin Boniadi. Nazanin, tell us first what you think these announced executions and the actual execution do to the situation on the ground. What are you hearing?
I mean, people are outraged, Fareed. And, you know, there's a slogan, a popular slogan, that for every person who's killed, 1,000 people will rise up behind them. And that's why I think we've seen these protests last for 3 months now, and there's no sign of them slowing down. So every image, every report that we're hearing and seeing of people being executed, wrongfully killed, is basically galvanizing Iranian society at large to protest the government even more.
Is the government making any concessions? Because we heard about the disbanding of the morality police, but that actually turns out to be something of a red herring, right? That's
exactly right. It wasn't a legal edict. It was something that was just floated by an official that had no real purview or jurisdiction to make that call. It should be something that the Ministry of the Interior is deciding on. And there have been no changes inside Iran. And it came at a time, conveniently for the regime, that was just before the nationwide strikes that were being planned and that has already taken place. And also the call for the Islamic Republic to be expelled from the Commission on the Status of Women at the United Nations. So these things seem to be somewhat strategic, but also haphazard at the same time.
Do you get the sense that there might be splits within the regime? Because, you know, the last time around when the Green movement came into being around that contested election, there were reformist members of the regime who seemed to be calling for, they seemed to be breaking with the regime. So could you imagine that somebody like Mohammad Khatami, the former president who was regarded as a reformist, or Zarif, the former foreign minister, who is regarded as a moderate, do you think these people might peel off, or is it really they're all in this struggle for survival together?
I think the latter, Fareed. I think we've now had a 43-year case study on the Islamic Republic, and what the slogans on the streets say it best. The people are saying what they want. They want this regime gone. And frankly, I think the statements by former President Khatami, where he said that a change in this system is neither possible nor desirable, goes against everything that the protesters are demanding. So there's not just a disillusionment with the reformist movement. There's an actual animosity towards them for perpetuating the regime and the brutalities that exist today.
So Steve Levitsky, this Harvard scholar, has a new book out with a co-author whose name I'm unfortunately forgetting, but it tries to examine when do dictatorships fall. And one of the points it makes is, one of the central conclusions is that regimes that come to power through revolution are the hardest to dislodge, because I suppose they kind of know they know what to do in terms of a mixture of repression and opening up some escape valves here and there, and exiling dissidents. So when you think about that, and you think about this regime that has so much control and has been around for 43 years, is it realistic to think that that these protests could actually snowball into something much bigger and much more deadly?
That's a very valid question, Fareed. I think no popular uprising of our time has really been predicted accurately, and that's possibly because human behavior is unpredictable. And in a situation like this, it's very easy to liken it to the Arab Spring and the outcomes there, or Sri Lanka perhaps, but I would encourage a little bit less cynicism, and maybe what we can strive for in support of this movement, because the margin between success and failure is very slim. And we as the international community, I think, have that ability to tip the scale in the favor of the protesters and pro-democracy and freedom, in the similar way that we did for South Africa. And if you look at the David and Goliath revolutions of the singing revolution of the Baltic states, of Czechoslovakia, Romania, and of course the fall of the Soviet Union, we have to have that hope, and we have to keep hope alive for the protesters.
What do you want the West in particular to do?
I think all we can do is, I think in the words of Michael McFaul, who the former ambassador, U.S. ambassador to Russia, he said it wasn't arms controllers who ended caused the fall of the Soviet Union. It was freedom fighters, basically, of Soviet states. And Karim Sajjad, for our friend at Carnegie, said something similar about Iran, that it won't be American diplomats, it won't be Western diplomats who do that for Iran, who cause an end to the Cold War with Iran. It will be the small d Democrats on the ground in Iran. So our job is to empower the small d Democrats inside Iran to achieve self-determination.
And do that by?
I mean, there are a number of ways. I think the Human Rights Council session was a very good first step. I think strategic sanctions, Magnitsky sanctions, have to continue. My hope is that we sanction the supreme leader. We haven't done that yet. And also there are a number of other ways. For example, you know, why are the children of these regime officials living freely and comfortably in democratic countries, while people like Roya Pirayi, who need refuge out in the West, don't get the same? And so we have to make a very clear distinction of who we're supporting and stop supporting and empowering the regime in that way, and start empowering civil society in Iran through internet access and things like that.
Fascinating to hear you, and you have extraordinary courage to be doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Fareed.